In this lesson, we're going to still graph quadratic functions, but we're going to talk about the focus of the parabola. As we learned in the last lesson, the parabola is the U-shaped graph that we create from a quadratic equation. The focus is what we're going to start talking about today. That is the fixed point on the interior of a parabola. So if the parabola opens up, it's going to be above the vertex in that picture you see on the left. If it's opening down, the focus is going to be below the vertex. It's inside of the parabola. It does lie on the axis of symmetry, and it's going to be a little distance away from the vertex. The parabola wraps around the focus, and the equation that we'll be using, or the formula, is the point of 0, 1 over 4a. We're going to use this formula to find out the exact coordinate of the focus, and we'll use the form of y equals ax squared. In our first example, we need to graph the function given and then identify the focus. We have to find that exact coordinate for that focus. As you can see already, I have changed the scale of my graph. I'm skipping a line each way. It will help once you see our points. And make sure that you guys also label your graph the same. If you ever change the scale of your graph, you need to label the points. As we did in the last section, what we need to do to graph these points is to make an XY chart. So I'm going to plug in the regular numbers I usually plug in are -2 to +2. And we're going to start plugging them in. -2 squared is 4. 4 times a -1/4 is actually -1. It's the same thing. If you're multiplying by -1/4, it's the same thing as dividing by -4. -1 squared is 1 times a -1/4 is -1/4. 0 squared is 0 times a -1/4 is 0. And then, as you guys have figured out in the last section, the numbers swoop back up, so they're the same. Now we're going to start graphing them. I go to -2, -1. I go to -1 1/4. I go 0, and then I go the other direction. Okay, so I have my graph done. Now it's time to identify the focus. As we talked about in the previous slide, the focus coordinate is going to be 0, 1 over 4a. So what we have to do is we have to plug in a from our equation and then figure out what our coordinate is. A in our equation is always in front of x squared, and we're going to plug that in for a to figure it out. So I'm going to kind of set the second part equal. We're going to figure out what our equation's going to be, or what our point's going to be. So as you can tell, I plugged everything in and I show it right here. Now let's simplify this. 1 divided by 4 times a -1/4. 4 times a -1/4 is again the same as 4 divided by a -4. You guys should have already figured out that it's -1, okay, and 1 divided by -1 is -1. So we have simplified this whole part, and we find that our focus coordinate is 0, -1. So we can go ahead and graph that on our graph, and I'm going to label that as the focus. Let's do another example. And again, we're graphing the function and identifying the focus. So I'm going to start with my XY graph. This time I'm keeping the scale of my graph as a 1, and I just have to plug in my points of what I want to use. So of course, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. -2 squared is 4 times 2 is 8. -1 squared is 1 times 2 is 2. 0 is going to remain 0, and they're going to swoop around again. So let's go ahead and graph this guy. So -2 up 8, right there. -1, 2. 0, 1. Okay, so I went ahead and graphed this like we were asked to do. The second part again is to find the focus. I like to write the coordinate each time because it helps me remember how to find the focus. So again, we're going to plug in our 2 in for a. They are the same thing. In any quadratic, the number in front of x squared is going to be a. That's the coefficient. So I have 1 over 4 times 2. This is pretty simple to simplify. It's 1 over 8. So we have found out the y value of the coordinate. So I'm going to write that my focus now is really 0, 1/8. So what we do is we go ahead and plot this. Now it's going to be hard to do. This focus is actually going to be pretty close to our vertex. So I plotted it as much as I could, and I'm labeling it, but guys, honestly, I want to see what the point is. I want to see that math that you guys did, and then you can estimate where it is on your graph. I'm going to do a couple more examples with you guys. If you want to actually pause the video and do the next 2 graphs on your own and find the focus, that's completely fine. Then you can come back and kind of check your answers. So on this one, again, I'm going to graph. I'm going to do my XY chart. Again, this is really great to work on your mental math skills. And we're going to just kind of plug these in. So -2 squared is 4. 4 times 1/6 is a fraction. It starts off as 4/6, but then it reduces to 2 over 3. -1 squared is 1 times 1/6 is 1/6. 0, you guys have probably got the hint, it's 0. And then we kind of soup these around again. So we have our points. As you can see, I have changed the scale of my graph. I kind of knew we were going to work with fractions. Usually when you have a fraction as your A coefficient, that is going to kind of mean that your graph's going to have some fractions. So I'm going to graph these. So I'm going to go to -2, and then I'm going to go to 2/3, you know, again, estimate where it could be. -1 and 1/6, 0, and then we're going to go back around. So it's kind of nice to have it spread out a little bit so it's a little easier to graph. I know that these graphs are a little small. So I've graphed the function. It's time to find the focus. The focus equation, again, I'm writing it again so I have it memorized. It's just easier that way. So I'm going to plug these guys in. 1 over 4 times 1/6. This one's going to get a little tricky. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply this stuff out. It becomes 1 over 4/6, which reduces to 1 over 2/3. Now, what this really means is 1 divided by 2/3. If you guys remember your fractions and how to divide them, you do copy, dot, flip, and you multiply across. Okay, I made 1 into a fraction and I just multiply across. So 4 divided by 6 or 1 divided by 2/3, the answer is really going to be 3 over 2. And that's going to be our coordinate. So let me go ahead and write the whole focus coordinate so we have it down. It's going to be 0, 3/2. And I'm going to try to graph that. Again, 3/2, you can put it as a mixed number or an improper fraction. It's really 1.5, guys. So I have it right there, and I'm going to label the focus right there. Alright guys, for this example, I've already gone through and graphed it. You guys should have a pretty strong hold on that. That was last lesson and this lesson. So just again, plugging in numbers, but I do expect you to graph the function. That is part of the directions. It does not just say identify the focus. You have to graph the function as well. It's great practice for mental math. You really shouldn't be using a calculator. So I'm jumping ahead and I'm going to do my focus equation. So I'm just going to plug in that -3. And this one, again, was pretty easy. Our focus is going to be at 0, -1/12. Yes, this is going to be kind of tight. Just plot it pretty close to zero, and that's going to be our focus. Like I said earlier, I really care about your coordinate. That's really what I'm going to look at. Just estimate where it goes on the graph. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit. We have to write an equation with a focus of 0, 4. And we're having that vertex at the origin. That's basically just to say our graph's not sliding around somewhere else on the coordinate, but we don't really need to worry about that. It's figuring out how to find the focus. So if our y coordinate is equal to 4, remember what our focus coordinate is always equal to. It's 1 over 4a. So we know that those are the same. What you do is just set up an equation. We need to find out what a is so we can plug it into our equation. The equations we have been working with, guys, is y equals ax squared. So once you find out what a is, we're just going to plug them in. So I'm going to set 4 equal to 1 over 4a. That is how we found 4 in previous example, so we're going to do it now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move the entire 4a just so that the a is not being divided. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to multiply both sides by 4a. Okay, what I get is 16a equals 1 because those cancel out. I divide by 16 and we are left with a fraction. I expect a fraction here, guys. So since we have what our a is, it's 1/16, I'm going to plug it into our equation, and that's actually going to be our answer. 1/16 x squared. All right, guys, let's try it again. This time our focus is 0, -3. So again, I'm going to set this -3 equal to 1 over 4a. That a is going to give us the a we need for our final answer, all right, that we're going to plug in. So like I did last time, I am going to multiply both sides by 4a because 4a are dividing, so I want to kind of cancel them out, get that a in the right spot. I will have -12a equals 1, and then I'll just divide by -12 to get a by itself. So a is equal to -1/12, and I just plug it in. So y is equal to -1/12 x squared, and that's the graph that has the focus of 0, -3. Now it's time for the word problem. We're talking about a bird watcher, and he uses a parabolic microphone to collect and record bird sounds. If you don't know what parabolic is, you could just think about what we've learned from, which is a parabola. A parabola is a U-shaped thing, so a parabolic microphone is a U-shaped microphone. So he records these bird sounds. The cross-section of the microphone can be modeled by y equals 1/24 x squared, and x and y are measured in inches. I'm underlining the most important parts. The focus is located at the end of the receiver arm. So what that means is we're going to have our microphone, and then it's going to come out like this. So that's going to be our focus, and it's going to be at the end of that receiver arm. So you'll see that that is how the microphone is set up. And then they're asking what is the length of the receiver arm. So they're wanting to know the distance, basically, between our vertex on a graph and then our focus. So we have to find out what our focus is. We've done this before already in previous examples. We have that our focus coordinate is 1 over 4a. Due to the equation we were given, 1/24 is our a, and so we're just going to plug it in. So 1 over 4 times 1/24, that becomes 1 over 4/24. This is one of those strange examples. And this now becomes 1 divided by, I'm going to reduce this fraction to 1 over 6. So what we're going to do is, again, what we did last time with our fraction operation is we're going to copy dot flip. That's what you do when you're dividing by a fraction. You copy down the first number, you put a dot for multiplication, and you flip that fraction, which is 6 over 1. 1 times 6 over 1 is just 6. So that is the y coordinate for our focus. So that means our focus is going to be 0, 6. I'm going to put an F there for focus. So if we were to graph this part, we would start at 0, 0 as our vertex, as we've kind of learned in the past, and our focus, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's going to be where our focus is. So again, the length of the receiver arm is how long it is from the focus to our vertex. Well, you guys have probably figured it out. It's 6, but because it is a word problem, we have to label. And again, it's measured in inches, so it's 6 inches long. This question is the same scenario that the last word problem was in, but the equation changed. Instead of the cross-section of the microphone being modeled as y equals 1 over 24th x squared, it's now 1 over 40th x squared. So we have to find the length of the receiver arm. Our first step is going to be to find the focus. You guys should have for sure memorized this coordinate already. So we're going to find out what the focus is and then figure out the distance from 0, 0 to our focus point. Okay, so I'm going to plug in 1/40 for A. So this becomes 1 divided by 4/40, which we reduce to 1 divided by 1/10. And then, just like we did before, we do copy, dot, flip. So 1 times 10/1 is 10. So our focus coordinate is 0, 10. If we were to graph, we'd start 0, 0 for our vertex, and we go up to 0, 10 for our focus. You guys have probably already figured this out, but of course the distance is 10 inches. That is how long the receiver arm is of this microphone. We are now done with the section of notes about the focus of the parabola. If you have any questions, make sure you star or jot it down and ask me when we discuss the notes.